Yo. Welcome to the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. Another week back with the boys. You got Smitty, you got Joe, you got Drew. What's going on, fellas?
Happy bye week.
Oh, man. I mean, you just ruined the show already for a ton of people. You're just bringing it up right away. This is what we like to call bye week hell. That's literally the way that I put it in the show's notes. And we can dive into, how you can kind of approach that, what you're going to do. I've seen so many screenshots. It's like, think about it. Buffalo's on a bye. Dallas is on a bye. Jacksonville's on a bye. The Chargers are on a bye. The Vikings are on a bye. And the Steelers are on a bye. Think about how many fantasy relevant players you have throughout those rosters. I mean, even for myself, Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, Deontay Johnson. How are you guys affected by the bye weeks?
The good part about being in 12 league, the good thing about being in 12 leagues is that you're just screwed in all of them. It's super fun. But we're gonna be all right. I think I have one 14-team league, and I'm trying to figure out from a running back situation. Do I roll with Devontae Freeman this week? Do I play it's getting pretty deep and desperate.
Devontae Freeman.
Will Murray not play? I hope not. Let's see what we can do. But
that boy Elbel was elevated to the 53-man roster now, though.
Well, all three of them scored touchdowns last week.
I know.
Let's just keep it up. Come on. But yeah, it's not gonna be pretty. And I think on top of the bye week hell, you have a lot of players that are pretty dinged up right now. So it's like you already have you lost a lot of good teams there, but you even have more players like your Gibsons, Chubb, Hunt, all of those guys who you would probably bank on in these situations that you don't have. So it's going to be a very interesting next couple of days with waivers and see how things pan out. You might be able to get some gems in there for a little bit.
I see Darian's here already. What's up, DJ? Brother DJ, I'm sorry. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful night. Let's just start with the injury stuff and talk about tomorrow night's coming up already. First game of the week, obviously. Kareem Hunt, Baker Mayfield, both not going to play for the Cleveland Browns in this game, as well as Nick Chubb, who had already been out the previous week. What's the confidence level if you had to pick up a D'Ernest Johnson to start? Or I know that we kind of touched on Felton as well. Out of UCLA, who's more of a receiver. He actually was running. I don't know if you guys remember when he was coming into in the pre-draft process, the combine and stuff, they were having him there as a receiver, not really a running back at all.
Right.
So, what's the confidence level if you had to pick up one of those guys? Which one do we like more? From a floor ceiling standpoint, kind of all of that.
Oh, man. So if we're looking at Denver in the last 3 weeks in the full PPR scenario, they're only giving up 17.1 points a game to the running back position. So that's fourth worst in the league. So not an ideal matchup for the Nick Chubb role, if you will, which is going to be D'Ernest Johnson. That being said, I mean, the Browns run the ball almost more than anybody in the league. We were talking a little bit about it before the show. I think that the floor is there with him. With Felton, I mean, he's had some flashes in the league. He's had that really nice touchdown pass that he got on that screen. I think it was week 2. So I do think that they'll try to utilize him a lot. We could see a scenario where Case Keenum is using him. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that if OBJ doesn't play, they're pretty thin at the receiver situation. We've seen that without Landry, without OBJ, that Felton could get even slung into a role in the slot. So I think full PPR, I think Felton has the higher upside. I like him this week. I'm playing him in a couple different spots out of necessity. But I think this week in particular, the floor is where you want to be, and Johnson is going to outrank him from a floor perspective.
True.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough call in my eyes. I think that Felton's going to have a better game if the game starts to get out of hand, which I don't see the Denver doing that. I don't see them putting up a lot of points on the defense. So I feel a little more safer with D'Ernest Johnson. I think he's going to get more volume. And we just saw what Najee did against the Broncos a few weeks back. The Steelers' offensive line is not good. We all know that. And the Browns, even though they're going to be without their 2 tackles, are
they for sure?
Looks like they're both going to be out. Okay. Yeah. They're not out yet, but there's a good chance that they're probably not playing, especially because of a short week. I still feel good about them being able to get some push against Denver. If D'Ernest Johnson gets at least 15 carries, I think that he'll have a serviceable day, but he's going to have to get into the end zone or else you're not going to get much out of him. But it's bye week hell, like we said. He's a live body. He has a pulse. There's a good chance he's going to be in your lineup no matter what because there's no one else out there.
Right. Yeah, I'm playing him in the league that I have Chubb in because I was really hoping Chubb would come back, but I knew that was a stretch, especially on a short week. Doesn't really make sense for them. They're going to have 10 days to get ready for Pittsburgh following this game. As far as Baker goes, I mean, he's not a guy that's going to be in your lineup unless you're like in a 2 QB league anyway, so I'm not sure how much impact this has. But I guess from a perspective of everybody else, surrounding him while OBJ is also dealing with his own injury, the AC joint issue, for everybody else, there's other pass catchers or even like catching the ball to the backfield. How does this impact them going from Baker Mayfield to Case Keenum?
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Drew, do you want to hit on like the OBJ injury? Do you think that he plays this week? I mean, I don't feel confident in it, but what are you seeing right now?
He has a grade 3 AC joint sprain. This is a similar injury that Cortland Sutton had last year, and he missed a few games. I see there's no way that he plays, and if he tries to give it a shot, I don't think he makes it through the game. He's not going to be able to lift his arm up above his head. That being said, Baker Mayfield, his torn labrum is very serious. So I actually think that this is actually an upgrade in terms of Case Keenum personally, just because he's been dealing with this injury for weeks, and Baker Mayfield needs surgery. He's doing everything that he can to not have surgery or wait till the end of the season, but it's just getting to the point where he needs it. He needs to have this surgery. Obviously, he hasn't been playing well, and the injury is greatly affecting that. I actually think Case Keenum's a pretty decent quarterback. We saw what he did in Minnesota. He's been in that system for a few
Kevin
years.
Stefanski.
Yeah, I'm not worried about him stepping in and actually playing better, if not, at what Baker was doing, which was not much. I think he's going to do better.
So you think even though it was the non-throwing shoulder, that it was still impacting his ability to accurately throw the football?
So when you throw, you still have to whip your shoulder out. You know what I mean? You're turning your body. So
Sure.
It's a significant injury. Like, I couldn't even believe that he tried to push it the way he did. And the way he fell on it last week, that was disgusting.
I thought he was done for the season.
Yeah,
bad.
I was going to say not even from a physical standpoint, right? Just like mentally knowing that Baker has to protect that could be impacting the way that he's playing as well.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what Case Keenum does for this offense. But I know that Baker, for all things that we can say about Baker Mayfield, he's a tough son of a gun. If he can play through this, he's going to play through it. I just wonder if Cleveland's offense does come out and look pretty decent, even with everybody that they're missing tomorrow, in Case Keenum looks okay. Do we see Baker maybe go in for that surgery because Cleveland just decides it's not worth it?
Yeah.
Let's take a look at the long-term future here and not just this season.
I would say pump the brakes. Denver's been a really solid team, at least from a fantasy perspective, against like pretty much all positions. I mean, their biggest weakness actually is their offense. So I'm not expecting a big output from anybody on the Cleveland roster. I think that like out of necessity, like I would start probably either one of the running backs if I had to, Johnson obviously being the preference there. Mm-hmm. I would not even worry about rostering Keenum. I think that if OBJ is playing, I think at least from what we saw the last time that Keenum was successful was that he locks in on one target. He locked in on Adam Thielen. Thielen did amazing things with him, and Diggs was like there, but like kind of secondary. I think if OBJ doesn't play, Donovan Peoples-Jones had a really good game last week. He had a couple touchdowns. We could see Rashard Higgins take a bigger role. I think realistically what's going to happen is they'll probably run a lot more 12 formation, use a double tight ends, but I wouldn't feel comfortable leveraging any of those tight ends, Njoku, Hooper, whoever. So I think at that point, if the only person I would probably feel comfortable playing in the offense right now would be OBJ, but with the injury that he has, I don't expect him to play on a short week, especially with the bye coming up. But I think at this point for him, he's been hurt so much and he's getting this reputation of he can't stay healthy, that I think he's trying to force his way through it just to kind of like buck that narrative a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, moving on to some other injuries then. Kadarius Toney, who's been absolutely electric when he's been on the field, but he's also dealt with injuries now in back-to-back weeks where he's left the game early. Well, actually, he did punch somebody in the face 2 weeks ago and got ejected, but that's neither here nor there. He was also injured. What do you make of this injury? Is he going to play? He's already doubtful, isn't he?
Yeah, he's already doubtful, and they said that, but they did say that he's not going to go on the IR, so they think it's going to be less than like a 3 games thing. For me, Toney is a player that could be a league winner, I think. It's interesting because when he got drafted, it was like, oh, why did you draft him in the first round? Why did you do all this stuff? And They kind of brought him on slow. He wasn't really doing a lot, but like he's exploded. Even in the game before he got hurt, already had 3 catches in the first quarter. Like it's clear that he was a favorite target for Jones. Knowing that he's a player that's not going to be out in the long term, I've seen him get dropped in a lot of leagues. He's somebody that I would be running to pick up. Like I would get rid of somebody like a Tyler Boyd or like somebody that's like a second or third player in the offense because yes, like at the beginning of the year, you had Sterling Shepard like getting a lot of targets, doing this and that. You still have Kenny Golladay doing God knows what. So if he can ever get back on the field, yeah. But it's like to me, Tony is that guy in the offense, and for whatever reason, he's the only one that can get accurate throws from Jones. So it's like, all right, like let's rock with him. He's clearly going to be a big part of that offense, and he's somebody that I would be looking to get if they've been dropped, like especially a part of this like weird like bye week thing that we have going on.
Right. Yeah. Drew, anything to add on Kadarius Toney?
So my concern is I know that they're saying that he might not go on IR. I've read reports from Giants Beat that his ankle injury is actually very serious. They don't really know what to make of it, and they're not telling us much. This kind of scares me because of the type of player that he is, like planting off that ankle, obviously. But the big concern is that it has like this weird Joe Mixon feel where like they don't want to tell you how bad it actually is. There's so many conflicting reports out there about his ankle, and he had this ankle injury for like the last couple of weeks, and it's just getting worse.
Right.
So like I'm not dropping him. I have him in I think 3 out of my 4 leagues. I think Smitty, Joe, you have him in the dynasty. So I have him in a lot of leagues. I'm holding him because I do agree with you. I think he's a league winner, but I'm actually really concerned as to whether or not this is going to affect him all year. I'll be honest.
Who do you think comes back first, Saquon or Tony?
Saquon. I think Saquon probably plays next week, not this coming week.
I want to see what that ankle looks like now. I want an update on that.
The swelling probably went down within 24 hours. He's probably back to normal. It's just.
See, I wish it was that way for my knee. Swelling down in 24 hours.
It was mostly fluid that was making it that golf ball shape.
Right. Yeah. So this is kind of on I feel like the opposite end. I assume, Drew, that you were the one that put this in here. Jerry Jeudy. What are we hearing about him? How quickly can we expect him back on the field for the Broncos?
Yeah, I threw that in there because there was a lot of people on Twitter that were making some comments about him coming back this week because they did say that he could be 50-50. He's not close. You're probably going to still have to wait like at least 2 weeks, in my opinion, for him to come back.
Yeah. So and that's another one that you said, you're kind of worried about what exactly he's going to look like when he comes back due to the nature of his injury.
His injury was gross. Like it was a bad.
I thought he was done. Yeah, I thought it was a broken ankle and he's going to have surgery. And
yeah, it was...
See, but from that perspective, right? It's like this is kind of getting into like medical stuff now. But the broken ankle, he has surgery. Probably takes him out longer term than the sprain. But that sprain is going to hamper him.
Yeah.
For the rest of the season. So even though he's going to be back on the football field, how dynamic of a player is he going to be, especially for somebody that's the type of player that he is?
Right.
So I think the speculation started because they had cut David Moore on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So they thought they were opening up the roster spot for him, but they ended up promoting Tyree Cleveland. So I think
I forgot about him.
Yeah.
Never heard of him.
He was a rookie in 2019. Or 2020, I'm sorry, out of Florida. He was at the Senior Bowl though, so that's why I know who he is. He's got burners, but
yeah,
there's a reason that he was on the practice squad.
Vic Fangio came out and said there was a 50-50 chance, and I don't even know why he's giving those numbers because, in my opinion, there's no way.
And Fangio said it would have happened by today because they have to take him off the list. So I think at this point, it's safe to say like he won't play this week.
There's also a 50-50 chance that Vic Fangio was around in the early 1900s. So
yeah, and he
doesn't really matter what he says.
He thinks that medicine is farther than it actually did.
Right.
This is a good segue.
I'm not taking these hypothetical medical advice from a guy that had polio.
Oh man,
but thanks for the input, Vic Fangio. The iron lung. No,
this is a good segue for Michael Thomas, though. If you want to go right into that,
be my guest.
Yeah. So. I've been talking about this since draft season, people going after Michael Thomas. And what was it, like the 6th round? There was like 5th round and then started to bounce back to 8. And I was like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm still sitting here. What the hell are you doing? He's eligible to come off of the PUP list this week. And they already reported he's not close. So you're looking at like 4 more weeks potentially. And then he still has to get conditioned. Like he hasn't done any football activity for over a year. Like if you have an IR slot, obviously you're keeping him on your IR slot. But like if you have a bench spot and you're holding him, like you have no idea what you're doing. Like it's a waste of space, especially for bye week hell. Like you need the roster spot. There's a good chance he doesn't play this season because the Saints are not good. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to risk him throwing him out there. And even if he does come back, say he comes back in week 10 or 11, he's at a very high risk of getting a soft tissue injury because he hasn't done any football for so long. So
same.
I'm still going to hype on this on Twitter. Like, why are you holding Michael Thomas? I don't have him in any leagues, had no interest in drafting him, and I don't change that opinion whatsoever.
I have him in an IR slot. I think I drafted him like round 11 or something like that. I was like, at this point, whatever. But again, I feel like we're just regurgitating stuff here. But it's one of those things. He comes back. How effective do we see Michael Thomas? And we don't even know what he's going to look like in this offense.
Well,
we haven't seen him.
Garbage.
They're not throwing the football enough either. Like I heard an argument from this PFF guy that I actually work with someone that works for PFF, and he was just like, he's like, Callaway has like a 25% target share. I was like, all right, so they're throwing the ball 15 times.
Yeah, they actually average the least amount of pass attempts per game with 24.
Yeah,
and they're bottom 3 in plays per game. They're
what kind of grade did that guy give you?
So I was arguing it. This is off topic, but I'll comment quick. He defends them to the end of the earth, and I actually had an argument. What'd you say?
The Saints or PFF?
PFF. So I had to actually argue with him that PFF graded Myles Gaskin better than Najee Harris this year. Like, did you see that?
What was his response? Yeah, what was his response to that?
He literally gave me all the grades and like why they got to it. I was like, can you just look at football? Like, it's not all numbers. Just look at a football game and tell me that Myles Gaskin is better than Najee Harris or playing better than Najee Harris. It was awful, but yeah.
Okay, I know that you're excited to talk about this one because of the other running back that this guy shares a backfield with, Antonio Gibson. So let's just bring him up. One, just because of the injury he's dealing with himself, but also J.D. McKissic, who, we're starting to see, him take away work, especially with Gibson's injury. He is one of my favorite. I know this isn't Platt's picks, which you'll see coming tomorrow, but he is one of my favorite players to just hammer the prop. His receiving's always at like 11.5, and his rushing's at like 9.5 every single week. But Drew, go ahead. Why is Antonio Gibson on this list?
Yeah, so he has a shin injury, and I think this shin injury isn't very serious, but I think that Antonio Gibson is struggling in game with pain management. So,
well, yeah, I know.
His leg's broken. Like, he literally has a fractured shin right now.
Yeah, it's a stress fracture, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's not like as serious as you like when you hear the word fracture. He's playing through it. He's able to cut, but he has pain issues with it from what I'm reading. So
I know a Washington football fan. Okay.
I think it got worse this week, though. I'll be honest. I think it did get worse this week. So there's a good chance he misses. But like he's been playing with this injury for like 3 or 4 weeks now.
I know a fan of the team that he's not like fed up with Gibson or anything like that, but he said he's just leaving a lot of yards. I think he's left the most yards on the field among running backs. I don't know what type of stat that is. I don't know how you find that, but I don't know if that's just him missing holes or what exactly is happening there. But I don't know if it's, a timidness due to the injury. Is that even a word, timidness? I don't know. Yep. It's not. It is one now. But I don't know what it is, but yeah, it leaves the door open for a guy like J.D. McKissic to see his role increase. And we saw him last year be a valuable player for that team, even with Gibson doing what he did. He scored 11 touchdowns last year, Gibson, and had a pretty solid rookie season. J.D. McKissic was still a pretty valuable player for that offense. And now this year with Gibson dealing with his injury now, what can we expect from McKissic? Drew, we had a little bit of a conversation before we started recording about McKissic that, you're considering playing him this week. Yeah,
I mean, even if Antonio Gibson plays, I still think that J.D. McKissic's a start because they're playing against Green Bay, and that defense can't stop anything. They have by far the worst defense in football in terms of fantasy. They're in so many high-scoring games.
Washington or
Washington.
Oh,
Okay.
I thought you were saying Green Bay. I was like,
No, Washington. Washington's defense is awful. Like
so they're gonna be playing from behind. You're saying they're giving a lot
going to
of
be
points.
playing from behind. I wouldn't be shocked if he demolishes that prop bet that you're gonna make on McKissick with receptions. They're gonna give him so many dump offs. I think he's a play even if Gibson plays, just because game script is going to go in his favor for sure.
Yeah, man, that is tough. I mean, to give people, especially with all these bye weeks and the injuries and stuff, like you'd have to think that there's definitely a path for McKissick being a starter. I'd have to see the rosters that we're talking about here but you specifically mentioned Darryl Williams and Khalil Herbert.
I'm struggling between Darryl Williams, Khalil Herbert, and McKissick
for one spot or
it's for my flex spot because I'm actually.
Herbert would be a no for me. Tampa Bay is lethal against the run.
Yeah.
I would probably play McKissick, honestly, because as I said, Darryl is not a good football player. I said that last week. I'll say it again. He fell into the end zone twice, but he averaged barely 3 yards a carry against a soft.
Did you see his first touchdown?
It was 3 yards.
I wouldn't define that as falling into the end zone. He made some nice cuts and scored from pretty far out. It wasn't like he just ran up the middle and tripped and fell and made it in.
That dude couldn't make a cut if he had scissors in his hand.
Well, he did.
Look, McKissick in full PPR is running back 24 right now, so I feel very comfortable. And I think that with the Gibson injury, let me look at the numbers real quick on usage. Let me pull it up real quick. If I could spell Gibson, that'd be super nice. Gibson only played 39% of the snaps. His previously low this year was 55%. So the shin injury has clearly got him struggling. And I think a lot of Gibson's ADP coming into the season was based off of the fact that, they had McKissick last year. McKissick pretty much plays every third down for them. But Gibson was a receiver in college. Like, he's going to take over. But the problem is Gibson sucks at pass protection. And McKissick is elite.
Yep.
All that to say, I really like him this week. I would start him with confidence. To me, he's like a great RB2, like flex kind of player. You're going to get the floor, especially in a full PPR format. I actually just learned about, of course, I just clicked out of it. But I just learned off about a new metric from these guys. It's called FF Intervention, so fantasyfootballintervention.com. But they have this, the statistic that they use for, what is the efficiency rating of teams against, pass-catching running backs. And Green Bay actually is pretty well at containing them. Let me pull up the numbers real quick. But they were, a top 5 team as far as, containing pass-catching running backs. So you might have a little bit tempered expectations going into the week.
That's why I'm considering Khalil Herbert while you're in that point, because they're playing Tampa Bay, who cannot contain pass catching running backs. And he did get some targets last week, and he didn't look like he was lost.
He looked great last week, honestly. I was
really
surprised. Good. I kind of threw him in there as what can we do? But let's see here. They're playing Green Bay. Green Bay is 10th, whereas Tampa Bay is 31st. So you might be onto something there as far as this metric goes. I don't know how well this tests out over time, but
Tampa Bay let Myles Gaskin do what Myles Gaskin did 2 weeks ago. And Myles Gaskin sucks at football. You think Darryl Williams sucks? He is not a good football player. Killing me.
But yeah,
I don't want to talk about it.
Could be onto something there, especially. I guess it ultimately depends. If Williams comes off of the COVID list, then that could ruin the whole Herbert.
Right. Yeah.
He hasn't yet.
I don't see him playing this week, even if he comes off the list, because the biggest concern after having COVID, which he did test positive, I'm not sure if he has symptoms because they don't release that, but the biggest concern is your ability to breathe, obviously. So if he's struggling with his conditioning due to COVID, obviously that could be a concern about how many snaps he plays if he dresses.
Well, even if he didn't have that bad of symptoms, I mean, you're not doing anything for a week, 10 days.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, hopefully he's able to get back on the field sooner rather than later. You hate to see that, but
of course.
I don't know how long that recovery. I mean, looking at guys from the Penguins and stuff like that, they were talking about I didn't do anything for 10 days. I'm still trying to get back to it. And I think the way that Herbert performed last week, I don't think they need to rush it, but it'll be interesting to see because it's now they have a weird problem in Chicago. They have a lot of viable options in the running back room that they maybe don't need. So could Herbert end up getting traded, or do they trade someone like Williams to a team that's looking for another piece?
They trade a guy like David Montgomery when he gets healthy. Because Khalil Herbert looked very good. Like
he looked fantastic.
Very good. They played.
Interestingly enough, Khalil Herbert was like the last running back from this draft class I would have been okay with the Steelers taking. Just saying.
You're giving the Najee not in the first round guys juice to go off of.
I see brother Marcus is now in the chat as well. Thank you for joining. But also wanted to talk about Christian McCaffrey here. Clearly a setback happened. The Panthers did not manage this well. It looked serious when it happened in that Thursday night game, and they tried to rush him back. Setback. Now we see him back on IR. How are you handling Christian McCaffrey here? Drew, from a medical standpoint, we'll turn to you first, and then we can kind of talk about what do we try to sell for or buy or sell, both sides of the coin.
So I'm on the sell side, and I've told you guys that a few times. My biggest issue with Christian McCaffrey is that I think that this setback was kind of, 6 games in 2 years. He's only played 6 games in 2 years. And I know it's kind of fluky because he came back last year from that significant injury, and then he busted his shoulder up, and they're not related. But I think that he rushed himself back. The team didn't want to push him the way he pushed himself. That's why they put him on IR, because they were just like, you have no choice in the matter. Like, you're sitting. And he takes a beating. He's been taking a beating for years. We thought that Derrick Henry was taking a beating, but Christian McCaffrey has taken a beating. I think that you have to try to sell before you can't sell. I'm very concerned about him the rest of the way. And I mean, if you have Christian McCaffrey, there's a good chance that your record isn't anywhere close to being at a point where you can think about not selling.
Well, and here's what I want to say too. It's like, even once he comes back, and from a real life standpoint, this will be very good. But from a fantasy standpoint, we've seen what Chuba Hubbard has done in his absence. Right. And to keep McCaffrey fresh, there's no doubt in my mind Chuba Hubbard is going to have more of an impact down the stretch than we would have thought coming into this year.
I didn't even think about that. He's definitely going to eat in for sure.
Yeah, so now I'm wondering, what is Christian? Are we even going to see Christian McCaffrey at like peak Christian McCaffrey like that? There's no way he's returning RB1 value, obviously, with the games that he's missed and everything. But is he even going to return weekly RB1 value? Because is he going to see limited touches every single week when he comes back to manage that?
Yeah, and I mean, it could be game script dependent too. Their defense has been very good, so if they're in games where they feel like they need to use them, they might push them out there. But if they have bigger leads, they're probably going to run the ball with Chuba a lot more. This could become like a free Aaron Jones type thing because AJ Dillon's been eating him as much as I know. You're a Christian McCaffrey owner, so I know it's killing you over there. But like,
I mean, that's because my entire running back room is gone now. But I mean, honestly, they're not. It's Christian McCaffrey. They're not going to turn it into an Aaron Jones like situation. Like Chuba Hubbard, he's filling in. He's doing admirably good for him. Like, who cares? He's not Christian McCaffrey. Like, if he's healthy, he's playing and he's going to get the touches. And even if they drop him to like 80-20, like he doesn't need to be playing like 90% of the snaps. Like, that's fine. Like, that's a Najee thing now. Like, we've moved past it, but like he doesn't need that to return the value. Like, they're not going to not have him in the game in the red zone, which is going to be the most important part. Right. And he's going to get the pass catching work because I don't think Chuba Hubbard is that fantastic in pass pro. No, McCaffrey's not great either. Yeah. But it's like that would be the thing that's like, all right, let's give him a breather. We'll put in the more like give Darnold a little bit more pass protection, but neither one of them has that like McKissick like sort of skill set.
Right.
So it's like, to me, like, you're not going to take McCaffrey off the field. They just paid him. It's not going to happen. I mean,
okay. Yeah. So I agree with you 100%, but is he going to be on the field? There's nothing to say that you can feel that way with confidence. 6 games in 2 years, Joe. 6.
Yeah.
Well, here's my thing. Matt Rule actually came out already and said that he's not going to see the touches when he comes back that we saw him have at the beginning of the season. So now I'm wondering, what does that look like? And the only reason I bring this up is because we're talking about what to do with Christian McCaffrey. If you're looking to trade him right now and someone's still willing to give you a haul for him, think he's going to be Christian McCaffrey down the stretch, I just don't think he's going to be that same player down the stretch.
Yeah. I mean, I understand where Joe's coming from, though, because
I still expect him to be a phenomenal player. He's just not going to see as much quantity.
But Christian McCaffrey's quality of touches are so good. So, like, I get where he's coming from. I just think that my biggest concern is I have zero faith that he's going to make it through this season. Like, I feel better about a guy like Darryl Henderson making it through the season than I do than CMC right now. And you guys know how much I was struggling with that at the beginning of the year.
Hey, Darryl Henderson, speaking of, if you're watching the Fritter Ticker at the bottom of the screen right now, RB3 for us. Those are collective rankings, by the way. So we all separately rank our top 10. Joe so graciously puts those collectively together, and that's what you get at the bottom of the screen. And in bye week hell, that's how it ends up looking like. Darryl Henderson is RB3. I mean, don't get me wrong. Yeah, he's warranted being up there, but it's, it definitely helps when you have the teams on buys that we do.
And Sony Michel,
we can't put this would have been a week where we could throw Najee Harris in the top 3 if they weren't on a bye.
He's top 3 right now.
He's the
third best running back in fantasy.
Is he number 3?
He's number 3.
5, but
he's 3 in mine. It could depend on what the
settings and different stuff.
Yeah,
he's definitely in the top 5 right now for sure.
I mean,
okay.
Do you think he catches Derrick Henry?
Najee?
Yeah, you think he catches Derrick Henry by the end of the year?
Dude. Can anyone catch Derrick Henry? Like, can I just
very similarly to the Buffalo Bills, he's not catching Derrick Henry.
In standard, he's like 4 touchdowns for passing, 4 points for passing touchdown. He's number 1 in fantasy over quarterbacks. That's unheard of.
I feel like I just need to eat like an entire boot or something because Derrick Henry, I finally thought like would slow down. Like, who like in their right mind is like, you know what? Like, I had a 2,000 yard season. Like, let me do better than that. Like, it was like, all right, like this is such a natural. Like, all right, he's gonna regress. They're going to pass the ball more because they added all these weapons. And Derrick Henry's like, nah, I'm about to force
new offensive coordinator.
Right. It's like, do you think there was anything that we could have pointed to that said like, hey, like we should have saw this coming?
But the thing is that like you can regress from 2,000 yards rushing and still be the best running back in fantasy because it's insane. That was insane numbers last year. But
except he's on pace for 22 some hundred. Like, it's ridiculous.
Right.
He like not only Joe, is this him punching you in the face for saying that, but also just the way that people view football in general. It goes against everything that people believe in.
Right.
All right. So turning our attention now to actually a trade was made immediately following playing on Thursday Night Football. Zach Ertz traded to the Cardinals the next day. I know Joe doesn't love this necessarily for Zach Ertz. He likes it on the flip side for where he's getting out of for Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia. But let's talk about this trade a little bit. What does it mean for Zach Ertz? What does it mean for Dallas Goedert? What does it mean for these two teams?
So in my mind, people are going to look at this and say, hey, you know what? Like, this is great for Zach Ertz. Like, he's going to do so much better. Like, but the thing is that he was the guy in the Philly offense that they lined up in the slot and they said, all right, you're basically going to be our receiver and we're going to have Goedert block. Whenever Zach Ertz was hurt last year, Goedert was getting like 8-9 targets a game, 70+ yards, had a few touchdowns sprinkled in there. So like he became like that de facto number 1. But when they were both on the field, Goddard's a better blocker. So then they would put him in and they would still slide Zach Ertz out into the slot. Now, if we think about what's going on in Arizona, at a high level, you're like, okay, like they're moving him to this prolific offense. This isn't Zach Ertz from like 3 or 4 years ago. Like, this is an older, slower, like he's got a little bit left in the tank for like a playoff run. But like, I don't see them like, he's not going to be the focal point in the offense. If you're thinking about what is it going to take for a tight end to like really be successful from a fantasy football perspective, like you need to have like 90 targets on the season. And we're looking at a team right now where Hopkins isn't leading the team in targets, where you have like Christian Kirk and AJ Green that are competing with Hopkins, like who's a top receiver in the league. And then you're going to add in another player to that. Like, I think that's just like, you're just further convoluting everything. Kyler Murray's not going to go, oh, well, Zach Ertz is here and we're just going to start throwing it to him. Funny enough, he has a great matchup this week, so I have him in my top 10, and it's probably going to look dumb for this immediate week, but I think in the long term, it's going to be a very touchdown dependent, probably sees like 3 to 4 targets a game, and that's just not going to be enough.
Yeah, I agree with everything Joe's saying, and I have a little biasy because I have George Kittle in the league, and I've been stuck with starting Zach Ertz ever since. Mm-hmm. The only argument I can make is that majority of tight ends are all touchdown dependent anyways. And I just think that Kyler Murray is a better quarterback than Jalen Hurts, so maybe we can get lucky. But
you don't think that? I mean, I think it's pretty apparent that that's the case.
I mean, yeah.
Fantasy football, real football, or otherwise.
Fantasy football, though, like Jalen Hurts has been pretty good. But I'm kind of hoping that Murray can just make him a thing, but he, like you said, he's going to be touchdown dependent, but you can argue anybody from 5 to 10 are touchdown dependent anyways. So if he's throwing, he's been averaging like 3 touchdowns a week over the course of the season. So if he can just get lucky and get one of them, he kind of made Max Williams a thing too before he tore his ACL.
Let me ask you, Joe, what would your response be to somebody? And I'm glad that you just brought up the injury to Max Williams, because you could just say the answer could be as simple as Arizona did this out of necessity, and it just kind of fell in their lap that they knew Philly was looking to get rid of one of their tight ends. But what would you say if somebody's response to that was, well, Arizona went out and traded something to get this guy, they're obviously going to use him?
I mean, sure, but it's not like they sold the farm on him. I think we always say like, oh, like follow the money, do this or that. Like it's going to be a lower round pick. Like to me, like as we know as Steeler fans, like 5th and below, like doesn't really mean anything because you can just trade him and then never even play a player.
You get a guy like Norwood. Come on.
Hey, you could get someone like Norwood, but not fantasy relevant. But I just think that there's too many mouths to feed in that option, in that offense. I mean, if I were to place Zach Ertz in like the pecking order right now, even if I'm thinking like the most optimistic like scenario, it's like, all right, you got Hopkins 1, Kirk 2. I would probably say Edmonds would probably be 3. Then you would have either Green or Ertz as the 4th option. So it's like at that point, like where does it go? For me, like I would rather play like someone like Dan Arnold. I would rather have Ricky Seals-Jones, who used to be for the Cardinals and has a nice little emergence in Washington. He's been great. For sure. So for me, it's just like, yeah, like if you have to, like, I know I made the call out on him a couple weeks ago and he's had this little bit of a hot streak, but to me, like he feels very much like a Dawson Knox to me, where it's like, yes, like he may have a stretch of games where he scores, but he's not going to command more than 4 or 5 opportunities a game. So it's like, could he make it worth it? Yes, but he could also throw you up a 0. Is kind of, go ahead.
All right, real quick. Before I forget, I just want to comment on Dawson Knox too. He broke his hand and he had surgery today. So, yeah. So I forgot to put him on the list. So I'm happy you brought him up. He broke his hand and he got put on. I don't think he's going to
completely miss that.
He's not going to be placed on IR. I don't think. Mm-hmm. The thing is though, he's going to try to play through, but you can't catch a football when you have a club on your hand. So I think that this is going to be a very significant injury for us going forward. He's probably going to be in there blocking more than he's going to be running routes going forward. So that's something we have to monitor. Because he's going to be playing with a club.
I mean, he threw the 2-point conversion with the broken hand, so why couldn't he catch it?
I mean, Josh Allen throws the bar pretty hard.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, I just don't see it. I think Ertz this week in particular has a pretty good matchup. If you're looking at like the weaknesses that they're going to be going up against, like who is it? Houston. Their biggest weakness is covering tight ends. So I think Ertz is going to have a good week. If you're like, but I'm looking at this more for like the long haul. So good this week. Long term, I don't really see it. He'll have games where he pops off, but when will they be? We don't really know.
The one more thing to add to Joe's point, because he's dead right. When they get into the red zone, that's when you're going to have to find Ertz. And one can argue that James Conner's their number 1 in the red zone. He's getting a ton of red zone carries. So, I mean, I support everything that you're saying. I'm just trying to hope for my own lineup that you're wrong, because I don't have any other options unless I'm throwing Mo Alley Cox out there and hoping he has one catch.
There we go.
Touchdown. So
Big Mac
out with your Cox out, baby. Let's go.
Hey, speaking of Mo Alley Cox, his teammate T.Y. Hilton comes back to the Colts lineup this past week. What type of impact does that make, in that receiver room? I mean, to me, just to give my opinion real quick, I think Michael Pittman Jr. is really still the only receiver that I would want to roster from that team, but go ahead.
So T.Y. Hilton played 50% of the snaps last week, got hurt in typical T.Y. of old fashion, but he did lead the team with targets. He went 4 for 80, no touchdowns. The Colts only threw 20 passes last week. They kind of demolished, and it was more of the running show. But it looked like he immediately slid back into that number 1 receiving role, even though Pittman has kind of taken that step. So Pittman played 96% of snaps, which is way more, but only had 3 targets in the game. So I don't know if that was them just trying to get T.Y. back into the swing of things. I don't know if that's just like Carson Wentz is like, oh, well, now you're square, so I'm going to throw it to you. and Pittman used to be square, and it just doesn't make a difference. But we'll see. T.Y. Hilton popped up on the injury report. We're not sure at this point if it is just like a veteran rest day or if it's going to be something that's like more substantial. But I think that T.Y. Hilton is worth a roster spot if you are hurting a little bit the receiver position, especially like I wouldn't, if he was sitting on waivers, I wouldn't use a waiver wire spot on him. I wouldn't put any fab on him, but he's somebody that could be like a sneaky spot. That could be like a flex potential. We're not sure how impactful he'll be, but it was a nice start for him to the season, especially when you're coming in later. I know, Drew, you say this all the time, that you tend to fade players because when they're starting late into the year, It kind of takes a while to get the gears going. So going 4 for 80 isn't a bad place as like a starting point. So I liked what I saw of him. Hopefully he's able to get back on the field this week.
My biggest concern for the Colts wide receiving core is I think that Jonathan Taylor's starting to take over, and I'm hoping that they start to give him more carries, some more touches, because he's been very good the last couple weeks. Very good.
Been great.
He's been running very well. So there just might not be enough passing attempts out there to feed all those guys.
Yeah. Right. I mean, if they're only throwing 20 passes in a game, that doesn't scream like,
you can't start anybody at that point. Yeah.
No.
Drew, I know you wanted to bring up this team's on a bye, so we don't have to worry about it this week. But Dak Prescott got hurt, literally throwing the game-winning touchdown pass in overtime with a calf strain. Now, we're going to have more information on that next week. Probably won't see really anything with that, due to them being on a bye. But, what are your thoughts on that injury?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one thing. So he has a calf injury. It looked pretty bad. He actually had to get carried off the field by Zeke. It was kind of like Kareem Hunt feeling, but I mean, his was much more severe, obviously. I just wanted to point out that even though Dak Prescott left the stadium in a boot, that's actually not something to be worried about. So the way the boots are constructed is it's going to put a level on the back of your heel. So when he takes a step, he's not going to put any strain on that calf. So that doesn't mean that it was actually a very significant injury. It's just something that's kind of like a protocol thing that's just going to help him relieve some of the pain. So I just wanted people to know that even though he was in a boot, there's still a very good chance that he's probably going to play next week. I wouldn't be too concerned at this moment in terms of Dak. Obviously, you have to replace him this week because of his bye week, but don't think that you need to go.
Tua Tagovailoa, baby. Yeah. Let's go.
So you're saying I should send a picture of someone in the boot and then say, hey, he's really hurt. We should make a trade.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
I'm willing to take him off your hands because I think he's going to miss significant time.
Go for it. Yeah. I mean, give it a shot. But
as we start to wrap up every single week, I want to bring this up every week as Joe updates this. So I'm going to bring up this week's, being that he puts us out every Tuesday, right, Joe?
Yep.
Yeah. So this is week 7. And the thing that's great about this, I show you guys this every week, but if this is your first time joining, not only do we have the PPR sheet here, half point PPR, standard, and also a breakdown of how to read the chart if it is your first time doing so. Joe, anything interesting here in terms of information to look at that, kind of pops off or catches your eye?
Oh, yeah. So if we're thinking about, like, what can I do to get through, like, this bye week hell, we already touched on, like, the Rams have a really good matchup against Detroit. It's always easier to find, like, the better matchups, I feel like, so that's going to all be in green. But something that's interesting for me is like, all right, like what are we looking at like at the bottom of the barrel? So like, for example, the Cleveland running backs, they were a hot topic this week, mostly because of the injury news. But if you can find someone that's pretty desperate, I don't think they're going to play that great this week. So it's like maybe their opportunity for a trade. How can we bolster our team? So I think from that perspective, like, all right, who's going to pop off? Who's going to be maybe a buy low coming into future weeks? I think someone like Allen Robinson could have a big week this week, finally. We've been seeing a lot of videos on him about like being wide open and then just not throwing the ball. His air yardage has been unbelievable, and now he gets to go up against Tampa Bay, who hasn't really been doing a whole lot against anybody except for on the ground. So for me, this is all looking at a 3-week perspective. So this isn't the entire season stats. There's going to be a lot of different variances based off of like your league and what you're seeing on ESPN or Yahoo or Sleeper, because they're looking at the average throughout the year. But what's nice about this 3-week look back is that it's constantly getting updated as things are happening, as we're changing. So something that we talked about in previous weeks, was how Baltimore, they had a pretty tough matchup against tight ends going into the beginning of the season. Turns out Baltimore might just suck against tight ends because they've continued to get throttled against them even after the weeks of Kelsey and Waller have slipped off of the radar. So it's a good way to say, hey, like, who have they played in the last 3 weeks? The other thing I will say is that now we're getting into bye week season. We'll still look 3 weeks back. And then if there was a bye week in that time, we'll go back to the 4th week. So you're not going to see like 2 games worth of data for any team. So it's always going to be their last 3 games. And it's something that's fluid. So look for the green matchups. If it's a red matchup, that doesn't mean bench your studs, but it's saying, hey, maybe temper my expectations. If I have a guy that I'm not as confident in and that's my flex, or if I'm deciding between that, then maybe this is a different route that I can go. But that doesn't mean, hey, like if Saquon does go against Carolina this week, I'm not going to bench him because Carolina's been great against running backs.
Right.
So don't use this as an absolute ranking system, but if you have 2 comparable player options and you're trying to decide between the 2, it's a quick tool to do that. So
coin flip. It's a coin flip decider.
Tails, baby.
No, but what I like about this now, as opposed to the first few weeks when we were showing this graphic and letting everybody know exactly what it was, is we have a good portion of data now. You know, like you mentioned with Baltimore, just going against the best tight ends, you know, that doesn't mean that they were going to be bad against tight ends this year. Now we have more information and more data to suggest that might actually be the case. But early in the year, it was just the fact, okay, look at who they've gone up against, maybe 3 of the best tight ends in football in 3 consecutive weeks.
Yeah, we were
so
at the beginning.
Right. But no, this is a really good tool for you guys to use. It's one of the many reasons that you should be following at AT412 FF Show. That will be in the link of the YouTube video. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you know when we go live. We do this show once a week. Do you guys have anything else to add before we get out of here?
One person that's probably sitting on the waiver right now that I think is going to pop off here in the near future after their bye week, Michael Carter from the Jets. So he was drafted.
Dynasty.
So he was drafted in the 3rd round or 4th round in this past year's draft. They've had this weird kind of like 3-headed monster that's like the worst monster ever approached.
Say monster.
Maybe like comparable to like the Baltimore 3-headed monster that they've been rolling out too. But he's pretty fresh coming off the bye, and he's got double-digit touches in his last 4 games. And their next 2 games, they're playing against really soft run defenses, and he has a great schedule for the fantasy playoffs. So if you have him available, that's somebody that I would be looking at picking up. I probably will be playing him out of necessity this week, but I think he's going to have a nice couple of weeks, and then will be useful later on down the season. So that's my one pick, shot in the dark for the week.
You know what? That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Drew, hurry up and find a shot in the dark play on the waiver wire still. And we say waiver wire. It's Wednesday now, so anybody that was on the waiver wire
should be free.
Picked up. But
my super deep one though is CJ Uzomah for the Bengals. I think he's gonna have a great game this week. So if you are in desperate need of a fill-in for a tight end, that's who I got. So looking at the matchup and even looking at the chart, so Baltimore is like a negative matchup for receivers, but they're a green matchup for tight ends. So I think Burrow is going to be serviceable. I know he was like borderline 10 for us in our rankings, but I think Uzomah is going to have himself another game. I'm excited to see it. I think Mixon's going to have a great game too. So those are going to be my 2.
This one's not really like a good.
Oh, I got mine.
Sleeper bold thing, but I think it's worth mentioning because
Derrick Henry.
Duh. He's available in every league, and we've actually been trashing him for most of the year. But he had a huge week last week. Kenyon Drake.
No, I don't like it.
He has a good matchup against Philadelphia.
All right, Drew, we'll see it.
Anything, and Josh Jacobs is still fighting that injury.
6 touches though. It's scary. It's a big risk. If he can find the end zone, it could pay off. But
you disgust me for that.
I mean, J.D. McKissick was my guy from the beginning, but you know.
Hey, roll with that. I think that's a solid pick.
What about Jarrett Patterson then? They like him over in Washington. Say Gibson doesn't play. Jarrett Patterson might actually get a pretty decent amount of carries.
I don't know if I could play him this week, but I think that's a great how do I get ahead of next week's waiver wire? Because if that injury gets any worse, McKissick is not going to be your first and second down guy. So I like in a deeper league, you're a little bit injury ridden on running backs. I think Patterson's a great ad, and you can beat that if something were to happen to Gibson. I like that a lot.
If I told you there was a receiver in his next 3 weeks that goes against Cleveland, Washington, and Dallas, what would you think? 6th most points, 2nd most points, 7th most points.
Would I believe
I just saw that
it
chart where they said 52.5 points against Washington, so that was enough for me. Devontae Adams is going to go nuts this week.
All right, so this receiver, this is the guy I would be targeting if I needed a receiver next few weeks. Tim Patrick in Denver.
Ooh, Tim Patrick has averaged like 12 points in like 5 of the 6 games this year. It's like between I think the number was like between 11.8 and 12.4 in PPR. He's done it like every week.
Tim Patrick's only owned in 36% Yahoo. So I don't know what it is on ESPN, but
that's crazy. He's definitely rosterable for me, especially so long as Jerry Jeudy's out.
I'm shocked that he's out.
That's gonna be my guy. I feel like I talk about him not as much as Darnell Mooney, but
he's only at 42% on ESPN. So,
well, there you go. There's some deep sleepers for you guys to think about targeting, especially with these bye weeks now really kicking into gear and causing some hell for you guys. As men of God, we hate to see hell created.
Real quick, another one.
You know who his quarterback is?
I don't care. Targets. They're trying to feed him the ball.
What do you have 3 catches last week or something?
I'm contemplating starting him against you this week in Dynasty.
Please go ahead.
Who?
Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Oh wow! Drew, you didn't even tell anybody that you beat me last week.
That's because you made fun of me.
He did have 7 targets. He turned 5 catches into 26 yards. What are they using him like Juju up there, or what's going on?
Hey, Dan Campbell said we want to get him the ball. That's enough for me to pay attention. Last time that was said,
we want to get him the ball behind the line of scrimmage.
Robbie Anderson had like 8 targets the following week, but I mean that's different. We'll see. Someone's got to catch the ball there. Quintez Cephas is out.
Yeah, his name's TJ Hawkinson, DeAndre Swift.
So TJ Hawkinson, besides last week in the first couple weeks, he was actually pretty much not impressive because he's on my team and I've been kind of yelling at him for a few weeks.
He's been banged up though. I think that's
did he hear it?
Into it.
He did. That's why he had.
Did he hear you yelling at him?
That's why he had 50 points last week.
All right. As always, guys, we can't thank you enough for tuning into this episode of the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. Get at us on Twitter, as I already said, at AT412 FF Show. You can obviously follow us there. Ask us any questions, start, sit stuff. Our rankings on the Fricker Ticker go at the bottom of the screen each and every week that we are under. But, tomorrow with the game kicking off, if you have any decisions to make for tomorrow, or obviously Sunday morning is a big day for us, just get at us and let us know any questions, etc. that you might have. Other than that, for Joe, for Drew, for Smitty, this has been the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show, and we'll see you guys next week. Praise God.